here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week, it's going to be the turn of the writer and journalist, Ben Cardew, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff, has just written a book, The Story of Stereolab in 20 songs. The book is titled Space Age Bachelor Pad Music. This is coming out in March, towards the end of March 2026, on Jawbone Press. So this is the interview with Ben. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of his early formative years before getting on to the book itself. Ben, it's over to you.
Well, I was always like a top of the pops kid, and like basically me and my sister used to buy the Now and the Hits albums. So I think Now 7 was the first one we got, and looking back at it now, it was like a really wide selection of things. And I remember we just sort of accepted it. It was like everything on it was pop music for us and everything on it was a hit. But if you look back at like some of the Now compilations, you've got things like New Shoes and like early house records, and like on the Hits compilations you'd get like Jesus and Mary Chain.
Yes.
I think just because, you know, we because of them and because of Top of the Pops, you'd sort of just kind of accept it. It'd be like, oh well, this is Jesus and Mary Chain. Oh well, this is, you know, Rick Astley, and you'd sort of put them in the same,
yes,
you know, the same kind of thing. So that, you know, that was where it came. And I guess after that, I kind of went down loads of different routes. There was a bit of like an Iron Maiden phase and like a sort of Dead Kennedys phase. And like, I really loved like Jesus Jones and EMF for a bit. And then like Suede and shoegazing and all over the place.
So was this the O years or the 90s then, your childhood moments?
Well, the early ones, the sort of Hits and Now, that was 80s.
Right.
But 90s was really when I got into like 91, 92 was very much, you know, when it started to actually kind of dig a bit and get into that.
Yeah. So were you the perfect age for, you were the perfect age, but did you embrace grunge at that point? Was the Nevermind album on your turntable at that point?
Well, Nevermind was. And I love Nirvana, but I remember being very disappointed by Pearl Jam. Like, my tastes basically, I didn't quite get into it. And I remember like, I'd be like, oh yeah, Nirvana I love. Then Pearl Jam I was disappointed by, and Soundgarden I was disappointed by. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm not that much of a, you know, not that much of a grunge fan. Whereas like when bands like Suede and I guess a lot of the shoegazing bands like Ride and Slowdive and Catherine Wheel and things like that, I loved all of them.
Right, yes. What about people like My Life Story and Space and that kind of slightly more orchestral 90s pop that started to, I don't know, develop during that period as well, wasn't there? Because there was obviously the Blur Oasis, but there was also, yes, a certain orchestral quality, wasn't there? There was lounge music became a big thing, didn't it, in the 90s as well?
By that point, by the kind of Mike Flowers Pops time, I'd more got into sort of dance music. It seems like, I guess that's kind of the way with teenagers. My taste went changing like very, very quickly, and I didn't sort of give up on anything. But like there'd definitely be more of an emphasis on other things. So, to be honest, like things like Divine Comedy, My Life Comedy, my what were they called? Sorry,
My Life Story.
My Life Story. Yeah, they passed me by a little. I was aware of them.
Right. Yes. And when did Stereolab come into your consciousness?
Well, the thing is, I wish I knew. Like, I wish I had that sort of moment. Like, I could tell you for some bands, I could tell you when I first heard them, but Stereolab, I know I was into them by their second album, Trans and Randy, because I know I bought that album and I went to go and see them at the Arts Centre. But I couldn't tell you when I first heard them. I would imagine it was John Peel or The Evening Session or possibly The Chart Show, but right. I don't remember that one moment.
And was it love at first sight? Was it the kind of, did you sort of totally embrace them at that point?
I assume so, yeah. As I said, not kind of knowing when it was. I'm not 100% sure, but I remember, like, when the second album came out, I was very much into it. Down the shops, um, probably day of release, and bought it, and I was so excited that they were coming to play. So it was certainly a very quick connection.
Yeah, so did you see them in Norwich?
Yeah, yeah, Norwich Arts Centre, 1993.
My God. Well, it's was it one of those the Wild Club events that Barry Newman used to put on?
It was, yeah, yeah, Monday nights, with
Well,
local support. I mean, I think it was about £3 to get in. I saw some fantastic bands
it was a good period. He did also have a very good sort of ability to pick bands. He was I guess he must have been a John Peel fan. So, yes, those sessions were brilliant. And, well, I mean, yes, he was just fantastic. Actually, you do need someone who can create those kind of events, can't you, at that time? And the Norwich Arts Centre was brilliant. So you must have seen them kind of in their infancy at that point. And then sort of how did the 90s play out? Because it sort of starts kind of quite sensitively, doesn't it? And ends with Woodstock 99, which is quite an interesting, because actually I loved sort of thrash metal and Husker Du and bands like that and the Butthole Surfers and Sonic Youth, but I just couldn't stand that 90s kind of, like you said, Pearl Jam, Soul Asylum, Marilyn Manson, the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I mean, all those bands are just comically hideous, he says. That's a sweeping statement.
I know what you mean, though. I know what you mean. Like, there's, I think if you look at the sort of Woodstock, was it 99? I can't remember. Like, if that lineup, it's just like, looking through, I just think, well, there's about two things I would go and watch over, the 3 days. And I mean, there was so much good music then, but I think there's so much good music all the time. Really, it's just
Yes, I think you just have to admit that if you come out with the comment, there is no good music, you're probably not into music anymore.
well, you're just not looking.
Well,
It's like,
yes, well, absolutely, because I know when I was into the 80s period and people who were in the previous decade just couldn't work, it's like the Smiths, the Cure, Susan the Banshees, the Cult, they just, oh, goth, what the hell, this is rubbish, and you kind of just thought, no, but it's great. Even I remember hearing Joe Strummer in an interview going, what is 1982? There's just no good music anymore. I'm thinking, God, Joe, that's a bit radical, but it shows your age and your attitude because you're thinking, my God, you're just going to dismiss Prince and the Smiths and all these other bands. You're obviously just an old man again. You need to embrace your, I don't know, Val Doonigan side and get your cardigan and a sort of rocking chair. Because when you do admit that, it's like, well, it's being made. It's just that we don't know where to go and listen to it anymore, or we're just not
exactly.
bothered.
I mean, one thing I do maybe slightly miss, I think, because of the way that the commercial fortunes of bands have changed, is that a band like Stereolab could sign to a major label in America, they could remain an indie outside of North America, and they could make 10 albums and never really have like a big chart hit, but they could continue doing it, and five-piece band touring around. I think the economics of that are really difficult these days.
Yes, I guess. I mean, most artists that I interview from that period all just think, I don't know how you do it now. In the back in the 80s, it was very much a there was I mean, things were quite cheap. Housing was kind of quite cheap. I mean, basically it was a sort of semi-squat sort of environment people lived in, but there was also unemployment benefit and job seekers allowance and stuff like that, so people could sign on to give themselves those years of practicing and then slightly get a label that will kind of fund them in a sort of way so they could. And also there was that element that you had John Peel, Janis Long, Kid Jensen, the 3 weekly music papers. So you got that exposure. If you got going, you could get your first single played on John Peel, get a John Peel session, and then get the transit van and go around all those art centres and alternative indie nights around the country, from Leicester to Glasgow, Manchester, Leeds, Norwich and Brighton, so you could think that you're on tour, sort of, but it gave bands that kind of, that little, you could just do another album now and another album, and then you can all fall out and hate each other. But you never want to tell them that at the honeymoon stage, do you, really?
Well, to be honest, there's a bit in the book when I talk about this, because it's looking at like indie London in 1990 when Stereolab formed, and I spoke to Mickey Bereni from Lush about.
Oh yes, you mentioned. Yes, I think that's where she mentions those, doesn't she?
Yeah, and it's like, you get the dole and it wasn't great, but you could just, you could afford to live, and you could get, go out, and there were gigs for like £3. And, you know, when I lived in London, you know, 15 years ago, it was pretty expensive. And now I mean, I don't know, but I believe, like, living that kind of the life of like a beloved of a 90s indie band, where you work a little bit, a few nights at the pub, or maybe you're on the dole, I think are pretty much.
They've all gone, yes, because dear old Joe Dilworth brought his book out last year, which is
Yeah.
the drummer for the Faith Healers, as well as A Moment in Stereolab. And those photographs are so evocative of kind of, both the living accommodation, which look more like squats, and then gigs, which look very basic and probably quite tiny as well. But as you said, for £2-3, you could probably see 2 or 3 really good bands, and there you go. The life was quite good in that respect. So it did sort of help the kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say industry, but it did help the creative process to continue, with the hope that things might get better in the next album and you get more success. But, until that point comes where you just can't do it anymore, it was probably better than getting a job at that stage.
Well, I think that's one of the things I love about Stereolab is they're so career. I mean, they were like dedicated and focused, and they wanted to have like they wanted to have fans. They weren't trying to be underground, but like, if you were like trying to create an audience or whatever, or trying to be commercial, there's no way you'd do all the sort of changes and the weird stuff they did, and change their sound all the time, and change band members. It was just like, they cared, but it's like what was far more important was the sort of, you know creation and being creative. And that's that's the thing I love about it. And that's why I think you get some Stereolab records that are absolutely bizarre, and you're just like, well, great. Why not? You can probably sell 2,000 of them and make your money back.
Yes, well, absolutely. There's and some are incredibly long and almost like jazz odysseys as well, which is quite interesting as well. But so with Stereolab, then they're quite an interesting band in the sense that Tim was in McCarthy, wasn't he? One of the
Yeah.
indie greats at our time, actually. So when did you decide to do the book? When did that sort of dream suddenly appear in your life?
So the first book I did was about Daft Punk, and that was released in 2021. And after that was released, I was kind of looking around. I was trying to think what else I could, write about, what kind of music book. And my criteria were basically a band I really like, or an artist I really like, that I've got stuff to say about, because often it's not. There are some like artists I absolutely love, I've got almost nothing to say about. And also, in a way, a band that I've got something to say about. And so, Stereolab, I had seen them live 3 times by that point. I'd interviewed them, so I had something. And also, I speak French and I studied French, so I know, that kind of helps with them. Obviously, a lot of their lyrics are in French, so I was like, actually, I think I do have something to bring. And I started to think, what I could write about, and there were so many ideas, and you're like, well, that's the right idea then, if you've got all this kind of thing you want to speak about, and you can say, and all these things you find fascinating, well, that sounds like the right band. And then so I think that idea was going. I think I started researching around 2023, if I remember
Right. My God. So you were, yes. And did it take long to get the sort of idea and the format and the structure of the book?
Well, basically, when the format, which is like 20 songs,
Yes.
when I thought of that idea, it all fell into place quite quickly, because it kind of gave, I think I need like a structure to work on it. Because one of the things about Stereolab that I love, but is also like they're very sprawling and random, and they do lots of different things. I didn't just want it to be like a straight history. So it'd be like, okay, this is almost like a guidebook,
Yes.
So when I had the idea, is that right? 20 songs, what are they going to represent? Okay, 20 songs represent 20 different aspects of their life. These are the songs. And then it's like, okay, there's your structure. And then it went from like having to write a book in capital letters to having to write 20 chapters. And you're like, well, I can do that, you know. And that happened quite quickly, I think.
Yes. I guess having that form does then meant that you could just kind of think, right, I don't have to keep rethinking it and sort of trying to yes, come up with a different idea. It's probably quite nice as a writer to have that as a very structured process and think, okay, I can't blow this now. I'm on to something.
I'm sure I could have blown it, but
Yes. And did you, at that stage, did you, because you mentioned that you didn't get another interview with Tim at that stage, did you approach them or what, how were you going to do that?
well, basically, I approached them. I approached their manager, and I said, "Look, I would love to do this book. Would Tim and Letitia be up for talking about it?" And he got back, and he was like, "No." And at this point, I was already speaking to Jawbone, so I went to them. I was like, "Look, I want to do this book, but Tim and Letitia don't want to be interviewed. Do you think there's a future in it?" And they were like, "Well, look, what you need to do is think of who you could speak to." And I said, "Well, that's a very good idea." So I kind of went away and came up with a list of, and I was like, "Well, who could I speak to?" And I came up with about 50 people. And I was like, "Actually, yes, I can, you know, definitely do it, I think." And so I sent the list back to them, and they're like, "Okay, right, we'll go ahead." And I didn't speak to all those 50, of course, and then like other people came on the list, but that was like a very, good backing to have.
Yes. Did you go back and listen to McCarthy? Did you sort of go back to the source of where Stereolab comes from in the sense of Tim's early years?
I did, and you know what? I was really surprised because I had always thought of McCarthy as like this, like really kind of hardcore-ish, quite punk band, quite hard. And I was really surprised that they were quite like jingly and jingle jangly, which I actually love. And I was like, oh, I didn't expect this at all. You know, I thought they were going to be. I think their reputation is of being like quite sort of dour and hard, and and there's actually these beautiful like indie pop songs. I was like, wow, this is amazing.
Yes, well, was it Red, Sleep and Beauty and We're All Bourgeois Now? I mean, they're all kind of indie classics from that C86 world, really. So I just thought it's quite nice to know what where some of the sort of source material comes from. Were you surprised that someone like Tim, after years of being in a band, and not many people can do this, and that finishes and the dream sort of dies, then sort of decided to pick himself up and do another band in another decade?
Well, you see, this is one of the things I love about Stereolab is I see it as a great like creative journey, but also a romantic journey. You know, because Tim and Letitia were a romantic couple for like the first 10, 12 years roughly of Stereo, or 11 years, and I love that. I think basically that's what happened. It's like he met this woman and they fell in love, and it was like, well, let's make a band together. And I just, for me, I kind of see the two things going hand in hand. It's like, that first flush of love, you're all excited. And, Letitia's case, she's living in a new city. She's moved to London. And I just see it kind of came flowing out of that, that maybe if that hadn't happened to him, I'm sure he'd have tried another band because, he's a very creative person, always making things. But like, would it have been as special? Would it have, I don't know.
Yes, I mean it's kind of interesting because I look at the early 90s as the John Major years after we'd had Thatcher for sort of 10, 11 years during the 80s, and then suddenly things start to change, don't they? I think the soundtrack of the 90s is so different to the 80s, the indie world, not so much the mainstream, but it was kind of the indie world, and certain bands like Stereophonics, and I mentioned the other orchestral pop acts as well. There seemed to be something quite happy and relaxed about it, whereas the 80s was full of angsty people feeling quite annoyed and angry about stuff. There seemed to be an optimism that started to develop in the 90s. Did you feel that as a young person, or just looking back during this book?
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally. Like I remember, Britpop felt very optimistic, and it was like the Labour government came in and Oasis. I mean, after like grunge, which was, quite grunge was quite depressing. We also had like Mudhoney and jumping around and kind of things, but like a band like Oasis, all about living forever, very famously, and the Stone Roses are a very optimistic kind of band, I think, as well, that kind of thing. And actually, I think that's something a lot of people misunderstand about Stereolab is that they, people kind of think of them as incredibly serious. They're this Marxist pop band. I mean, they're not Marxists. They've said it many a time, but it's almost too good a description. And so people are like, oh my God, they must be serious. And if you look in the lyrics, they are, they're very serious things, but there's also like really stupid songs and happy songs and all kinds of things, really.
Yes. Did they have a game plan at the beginning of where they were hoping to get to, or is it a case of just putting out a record and seeing if there was an audience for them?
I think it was that. I mean, I think basically they did their first demo. The story goes they did it. Tim and Letitia, and a few people. I think it was in one of who was in McCarthy. This is in the book. I can't exactly remember, but anyway. And they just wanted to be signed to the same level as McCarthy. It was like right, and we'll do that, and we want to put together a single. And I would be. I think like they are, like Tim, for example, kind of knew what was going on. He'd been in the band for many years, so I think a game plan is maybe overstating it, but like he certainly understood, like, okay, I can set up a label, do a single, and then if that does one, another single, and then possibly an album, that kind of thing. I think because he'd done it before.
Yes, and had you also got into dance? You mentioned dance music because it was around the Castle Morton period and raves and sort of there'd been the Travellers and the Levellers and people, all that world. But there was that kind of world going on because I remember in the 80s going to Glastonbury and it was all very Glastonbury in the 80s. But the 90s felt quite different again. There was bands headlining, like I think Carter was suddenly the headline band at the Pyramid Stage on a Saturday, which was like, God, that's really amazing. How did they do that? And good luck to them. They captured a zeitgeist. But did you also get into that world of raves and travellers and yes, illegal gatherings?
Well, I was a bit young for that. Like I remember hearing about raves, but by the time I was of any age, I could have, gone to them. They basically disappeared. That was kind of far too late for that kind of thing. I definitely got into dance music very much so, but I was kind of listening to. There was like there was a sort of scene of like live dance music, which again happened quite a lot in Norwich. Like I remember like going to a Mega Dog, and there was Aphex Twin live, and I remember
yes,
I think I went to see Orbital at the UEA. Gigs basically by electronic music bands, and they'd have DJs, that kind of thing. But I was going to that kind of thing more than clubs, basically, and certainly more than the Levelers, sort of Back to the Planet, that kind of thing, which I kind of knew was going on, but like wasn't necessarily.
Oh, there was Censor, wasn't there? That was the other band that people loved. Censor at that stage, didn't they? Yes, you mentioned Back to the Planet. I thought, oh yes, there was that sort of that side. So Stereolab, your book starts with a super electric, didn't it? From yes, that's how it begins. So with this particular release, then, did it feel like the band? This was their blueprint for the next decade. Was this kind of the opening sort of shot for them? And yes, the opening chapter in your book as well. So was that because you go through it sort of chronologically with the music?
Yeah, I mean, it basically felt like their very first single, Super 45, was really good, and you could hear a lot of their sort of Stereolabness on it, but it was just at the same time like some of the drumming was a little bit that baggy beat, and some it felt a little bit muddy, and then it just felt like on Super Electric they absolutely nailed it. It was like it wasn't that different, but the small difference it made in having that kind of driving like motoric sound and in having it sound really clean and fresh, it was an immense difference. It was just like, okay, that's Stereolab, they've got it. And it found like basically the second single, you've got it. And of course they were then change a lot throughout their lives. But like even on their sort of latest records, occasionally they'd go back to that kind of thing. And I think when people think of Stereolab, probably it's that. It's hard to know, but I think that's often what they think of. The driving guitars, one kind of chord or two chords or whatever, and that was super electric.
Yes, that was quite amazing. So by the first, because they were still on two Pure Records, weren't they, at that stage? This was their
Yeah,
kind of early years, and that had Joe Dilworth on drums, didn't it, at that point?
yeah.
And Martin, who was he at the bassist for the Chills?
I believe he was. Yeah, yeah.
My God, they was quite a super band, weren't they, at that stage? So then how do you look at their progression during the 90s then with their debut album?
Well, I think it's fascinating because their debut album Peng is one I didn't listen to that much. It's not. I mean, to go back briefly, one of the reasons I wanted to write the book was because if you like, I remember thinking a few years ago, I love Stereolab, but like, I'm not sure what album I would recommend to people. It's like it was all like all this kind of things in my head, and one of the reasons I want to write it was kind of like get it clear for me. So throughout the 90s, I mean, I love what they did in the 2000s. I love the most recent album, but in the 90s, I think probably most people would say was their best, best creative period. And for me, their sort of probably four best albums were all in the 90s, and they changed that. I mean, the first two albums were very kind of like hard, like motoric indie. The third, they went a lot more pop. Then they kind of like Emperor Tomato Ketchup, they embraced a lot more electronic sounds, which went even more so on Dots and Loops after that. So yeah, they really did change throughout the 90s, and they really did produce a lot of their best work. I mean, I think they are one of the most impressive examples of sort of, I was about to say, of modern indie music, but just of music of a band that just keeps on progressing, just keeps on changing.
And they also, there was that sort of, was it 93 they bring in extra members, don't they, as well? Because it's, is it Sean O'Hagan that joins the band, who was in the High Llamas? And what was the other band he was in the 90s? God, oh, Micro Disney, that's the one, isn't it? So was that quite a major shift for the band during that period, at the mid-decade?
Yeah, I mean, basically, they had absolutely loads of members like during the early years. Like if you look at sort of if you look at their early gigs, like basically on Wikipedia, it's like it says like it mentions like about 5 different members, but actually apparently it was about 10. And then like Sean O'Hagan came in. And he was really, really important for them. But actually, he was only with the band for one album, and then he left to do his own kind of thing. I mean, probably the really big thing was Mary Hansen, who came in 1992 and did the other kind of like the vocal, the dual lead.
Yes.
And she was like really, really, really important. And so was Andy Ramsey on drums. So they both came in 1992, and that was kind of the point where you could probably say, well, the line really solidified. I mean, I've actually been trying to think, not because I stupidly try to rate things in my mind, like who the third most important member of Stereolab is, and after Tim Gain and Letitia Sadi, obviously. And it's like, well, it's probably Mary Hansen, but it could be Andy Ramsey, but it could be Sean O'Hagan. They're all like, they're really, really important, really important people.
And then by their next album, which is this Transient Random Noise, this is the one with the massive experimental track, isn't it, Jenny, which is quite an epic moment. And this is also in your book, isn't it? How did you process that when you first listened to it? Because it's quite a journey, isn't it? An epic journey.
Yeah, 17 minutes long. And I mean, I think by that point I was into quite weird music, like I'd discovered the Velvet Underground and things like that. And so yeah, I remember being very impressed by it, but I don't think it was like one of the that particularly was an incredible sort of turning point or whatever. What I remember a lot about that album is basically, I bought. It's got quite a muddy sound with it, and I was listening to it on a rubbish record player, and so I was listening. Basically, the sound quality must have been absolutely terrible, but it still just blew me away with it. And I love that song, the way it just keeps on going, like the different phases, but it just keeps on coming back to the same thing and the power it's got. And they basically started to do this thing, which is like on a lot of their albums, they had like a song that lasted one side of the record, and almost like a suite, if you see what I mean. Changing through different parts. And Jenny on the Limb was like very much the size. That's an amazing song.
Yes, it is quite. But the one that I suppose I did like, this is very predictable to mention Ping Pong, because that's the one that seems to have done, for me, was the massive moment where you thought, God, this is just such an amazing band. Is that quite a predictable thing to say?
Well, it is, but like it's an amazing song. So it's like, but basically one thing I did in the book was I asked lots of people their favorite Stereolab song, so it was an easy thing to kind of ask. And I had
Yes.
to tell, I was like, if you could not choose French disco or ping pong, that would be quite helpful. But still,
Right.
people chose
Okay. Yes.
French disco. I mean, I also chose my favorite song for the record, and I chose one from like Margarine Eclipse because I was trying to be clever and different. But actually, if I had to say my favorite to listen to, it may well be Ping Pong. It's just,
Yes.
and the lyrics as well. I mean, when you get into the lyrics, it's like about capitalism and the capitalist cycle among the most beautiful like, pop songs. It's just amazing. Like I don't know of anyone else that could do that.
Well, I thought yeah. I mean, it just seemed to capture. I think there was a sort of sonic quality to it that just seemed to be sort of, I don't know, otherworldly, really, and just also just it had a romanticness to it as well, which I quite liked actually. Did you? I mean, as you followed the band over the decades, were you quite amazed to see when they had sort of made their comeback? Did that surprise you when the band finished? And did you have a sort of an existential moment of angst when it was all over at that point?
Well, what happened was I think I'm a big like believer that we don't appreciate bands until they've gone. We don't really appreciate them. And I think Stereolab unquestionably towards the end of the first phase of their life, interest in them was declining. And they were still making brilliant records. They were still brilliant live. They were still an amazing band. But I think people were just a bit like, oh, it's another Stereolab album. It's the ninth Stereolab album, which is totally unfair. But I can kind of understand as well. So when I remember when they split up for the first time, I was a bit like, oh well, all right, well, okay, fair enough. And also, I think after Mary Hansen died and like Tim and Letitia split up as a romantic couple, you're probably like thinking, I don't know how long this band can go on for. And I saw what was actually I didn't realize it at the time, but it was one of their very last UK gigs before they split up, and I remember really enjoying it. But it wasn't like seeing them in 1993, and the problem was mine, not theirs. But I just think that's often the way. It's like it's like the Fall. It was like
Yes.
Fall always playing, and then Marky Smith died, and it was like, oh my god, the Fall.
Yes. Well, I had that same experience with the Smiths. I was obsessed with them, and then I must admit, the last album came out, and I wasn't that bothered. And then it was like suddenly, oh, they're over. And then I listened, and I just had, it was almost you'd saturated on that. Oh right, I hadn't sort of. It wasn't appreciation. It was just like saturation point, I think. And it was like, God, I don't want to go through that whole process of being endlessly obsessed with it for months or almost a year and learning every lyric and and it's like, oh god, okay, I'll listen to it one day. And then they split up, and then there was all the drama of them splitting up, and that was slightly tedious. So you just think, oh well, that's life, isn't it? But with Stereolab, that story that I heard in the book with about Mary and sort of reading about that was absolutely horrendous, actually, to have that happen in the band. How did they cope with it, losing such a key sort of person within their sort of lineup?
I mean, on the one hand, you could say they didn't really cope because, apparently they'd never really sat down and were like, look, how do we feel about this? How do we feel about this immense loss? You know, they just kind of got on with it. And on the one hand, I think continuing to make music was like a real relief for them and, kind of getting back to routine. But yeah, I mean, what's notable is after Mary died, they didn't have that second vocalist. So on the later albums, you've got like Letitia who's doing the vocals with herself basically. And I think still to this day they don't do a lot of the songs that Mary was particularly prominent on because she is kind of unreplaceable, and they didn't want to replace her. If
Yes.
that makes sense.
Well, absolutely. Because you mentioned Mickey in the book, because when Lush decided to have that famous reunion to sort of come back and they were going to do these dates in America and all become fabulously wealthy with it and gave their day jobs up, that tour went terribly wrong. And I know Phil had left the band, the bass player, before the last couple of gigs, and there's been lots of stuff that went down. Did with Stereolab, was there a sort of why did they sort of want to come back again in 2019 after having such a break?
So they were reissuing not all of them, a lot of their albums, a lot of their kind of classic albums. And in fact, if you look at the announcement where they announced their reunion, it goes, Stereolab are announced the reissue of these albums, yada yada. They'll be in these formats with extra material, etc., etc., etc. And then like right at the bottom, it's like, and the band will be playing again live later this year or next year or whatever. And you're like, and it's like, oh wow, they kind of really really buried it as if like, oh yeah, because they didn't say they were splitting up. They said they were going on hiatus, when they did it. So it's like, oh yeah, no, we were just on hiatus. It's not a reunion.
Yes.
But I mean, it's kind of splitting words, isn't it?
I guess it's a kind way to say, without being completely final about it. Because often, I always remember when there were certain bands always doing their farewell tour, like, I don't know, I think it was Status Quo or Steeleye Span. And then you're thinking, yeah, but you keep saying that every year. I'm not sure if you can get away with that anymore. I think they used to do that. And then eventually, I think bands thought, perhaps we're not going to just stop, are we? We need to keep going for sort of emotional reasons and probably financial, so we'll do it. So did you sort of so in the book you mentioned about going to see them, didn't you, and the certain trepidation, and what was it like when you saw them again? Was it an emotional experience for yourself as well as for them?
So funnily enough, the first gig I saw of them reformed was Primavera Sound, and I was actually working that night. I had to go and sort of interview someone, so I was still kind of slightly in work mode, and I enjoyed the gig, but like not as much as I could have done, I think. And also for me, the set list was a little bit too greatest hitsy, which seems like
Right.
that's a really stupid complaint, but you know what I mean. But so I enjoyed it, but like I didn't kind of go mad for it. But then the next time I saw them, I really enjoyed it because they went a lot weirder. And like I wasn't working, I could sort of devote myself to it, and I was like, wow, this is really, really, really incredible. And then the last time I saw them, which was again at Primavera Sound, was very emotional indeed because I knew that was going to be the last chapter, the last little bit of the book, and I'd been writing it and I'd been living in the Stereolab world, and it was just like, all right, this is it. And also the other thing was, it's quite solitary writing a book, even if you're talking to people.
Yes.
And there are times when I'm like, does everyone like Stereolab? Does anyone like Stereolab? Is it just me? I'm like seeing this massive crowd of like really quite varied crowd, varied ages, people from all kind of around different places, like really enjoying this band that I'd been writing about. It was like very emotional moment.
Yes, well, I could imagine. And also, as I probably alluded to, I think there's kind of an interest as the decades go on that a lot of bands who were there in the 80s probably thought, well, that's it, that's over. No one's going to want to rediscover it. And then you get, I don't know, cherry red records start reissuing packages. And then just that curiosity. When I was younger, there was always a curiosity going back to the parts of the 70s that I miss, and definitely the 60s seemed very glamorous and exciting, and then eventually you go back a bit further. But for kids now, I'm always amazed on certain, I don't know, platform sites where you get these young people dancing around singing songs. I find that I'm just fascinated because they're the most obscure tracks. And I'm thinking, you must be all of 18. I'm always curious what they're going to be playing next as they do these things, which is a bit of an odd hobby to have. But at the same time, and it's odd that someone like me is watching them as well, probably. But I'm always kind of curious thinking, guys, your parents probably didn't even listen to that. They would have been too young. So how did you discover that record? So I guess perhaps it's the same as I was. You just think, right, I'm going to discover a band and no one's found them or no one knows about them and they're going to be all mine. And I guess Stereolab's got this incredible wealth of material.
Well, I find it fascinating as well. I agree with you that looking back at which bands from our childhood people pick up on, because you think some of them must be really big and they're not so much, and then other ones people are really 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 into, like young people are really really into, like I don't know, I feel like it's a bit cruel, but like I don't know, I don't think young people listen to the Happy Mondays very much these days. And I love the Happy Mondays.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, don't worry. I thought I was just thinking of actually my life story. I'm not sure if they're ever going to get rediscovered, but I loved them so much actually at the time. But
you should,
yes,
you should to rediscover them for people.
I should do actually. Poor old Jake, he's doing so much. But yeah, I don't know. They had great lyrics and they had great stage presence. But somehow, Stereolab, I can see that people are going to somehow, I don't know, embrace them in a great cult sort of way. So I would imagine the audience was quite varied when you saw them quite recently, and yes, all
Yeah,
sorts.
totally, and again, another of the last bits of the book was when I went to this album launch party in Barcelona, in a like local record shop, and I sort of went around talking to people, and people of very different ages, and there were some people from Brazil and some people from the United States and like Catalan people, and and young, and like an 18-year-old guy who and or people my age and all kinds of different things. It's just kind of fantastic to see, and like realizing that Stereolab have a real following in Brazil, for example, you know.
Yes.
And I just think it's wonderful, really. This weird indie band formed in London in the early '90s, and they love Brazilian music, and like Brazilian music fans kind of love them back in return. It's like it's a wonderful.
Well, I suppose kind of musically, there's a lot of different little elements in Stereolab that you kind of pick up on, and they do have that, I don't know, slight. It's not the girl from Ipanema vibe, but there is something kind of, you put that on, and I don't know, it always makes me think of that kind of soundtrack, a little bit like the Austin Powers kind of vibe, wasn't it? That kind of period where that sort of cool Britannia, and I know that they had a French singer, but there was also that element of kind of optimism and sort of innocence as well as kind of sophistication about them. Somehow, I thought that was the kind of aspect of Stereolab that I picked up on when I was listening to them back in the day.
Well, I find I find the fact that they're an Anglo-French band quite inspiring, because um, when I was younger, people didn't really listen to a lot of French music, and you'd get a lot of people, British people, like, oh, French music, what, and I was a real francophone. I liked the idea that there was this band that kind of united like English indie music and a bit of,
Well, yes,
there.
absolutely. And when you heard their latest album, what did you make of that? That none of those tracks get included in the book, do they?
They don't. So they're not on the 20 list. I do talk about that album, But basically, when that came out, when the album was announced, I was pretty far along, and I thought, okay, should I include one of those songs in among the 20? I knew I had to speak about the album, but I was like, should I include one of those as 20? And I went back through the 20 I had, and I was like, I couldn't knock anything off, you know. And like the obvious one would have been like Infinity Girl, which is the last one that I talk about. But then Infinity Girl, A, is a song I love, and B, I quite like the fact that, you know, you can talk about things going on until infinity, which seemed a quite nice way to end it. And I really, really, really like that the last time. I think it's a lot better than it's got any right to be. But yeah, there was a moment like, no, okay, I'm just going to keep. I couldn't find anything to knock out, mate. You know, at that stage, so I was like, okay, no, I'm keeping it.
Yes, well, there you go. And are they, you know, with doing this particular book and all the research, what did you, you know, discover that you hadn't realised before when you started the project?
I mean, on a very, um, I don't know, I discovered lots of songs, but I think I always knew that they were pretty wildly eclectic, but like I didn't quite realise how much. I mean, we were talking about Brazilian music before, and I don't. Do you remember the compilation album Red Hot in Rio?
Yes.
So they had a song on that, like covering surfboard and one note samba, and I don't think I knew about that. I don't think I knew about that at the time. And you look at that and you think, how many other indie bands, you know, who were on Too Pure or whatever, how many other indie bands could have done that? And
Yes.
it's no slight on, you know, the Faith Healers or you know, PJ Harvey or like great bands, but it's just like they couldn't have done that, or that they wouldn't have done that. And you see, like, you know, it's how many people have sampled Stereolab, and you know, they've been sampled a lot, and they've been sampled on like big kind of hip hop hits, you know, like top 10 hits, I think. And again, it's like you don't get that with Silverfish, you know, like.
No,
um
I used to love Silverfish, bizarrely.
oh yeah, again, nothing against Silverfish,
No,
like.
my God, no, don't worry. But yes, I know when I first heard that song, Total effing arsehole. Yes, it was quite basic, wasn't it? And various other songs that they did, which, you know, I used to love Leslie. I thought she had a great presence to her. They were a band I saw at the Arts Centre. Actually, they were supporting My Bloody Valentine when I first saw them, and
There's a
that
gig.
was quite the sound. Yes, good old Barry from the Wild Club in Norwich. He did know how to pick them. But the great thing with Stereolab, they also got the blessing, I suppose. It's a bit of a corny thing to say of John Peel. They did quite a lot of sessions, didn't they?
Yeah, later on as well. Like, I think. Oh, I should know this, but I think they did about 5 sessions or something like that for John Peel, and you know, like even later on in their life, and you know, I'm sure it's the same for you, but that was always a massive thing
Yes.
for
I
me.
think they did a whole live from Maida Vale, didn't they, in
Yeah,
1997, which was one session, and but they had done one from 91 was their first one, where they did Super Electric and Change of Doubt and Difficult Fourth Title, and then virtually every year they just kept on going, didn't they?
and
That
they
was
were in the
amazing.
festive 50 most years, I think, as well. You know.
Which was, yes, I think when you got the John Peel blessing, there was always something quite, I don't know, I know it sounds really corny, but I sometimes, if I wasn't sure about a band, but John Peel liked it, it would heavily push me to sort of think, right, I'm going to like that no matter what. I mean, it didn't necessarily mean I'd go and buy the record, but I suppose he curated his show so well, and it wasn't like done by a committee. I just always thought it was a kind of a good sign that he gave it the A-OK, didn't he? Yes, because they recorded one session where they used the second one with the John Cage bubblegum as well, which was quite an amazing track as well, wasn't it? And that also is included in the book, isn't it?
Yeah,
What was it about that particular track that you loved so much?
Um, it was one. I think that, as I said, like the various tracks stand for various things, and that was for the idea of collage. So sticking together two ideas that seem like they shouldn't go together. So you've got John Cage, like really, highbrow art, and you've got bubblegum, like bubblegum pop. So I wanted a song that would kind of speak about that, because they do that a lot. Like they have songs as well which are like collages, where they start off on one and they just stick something else on that's like almost a totally different song. And I just thought that really worked. Kind of like just the title, I thought it was just such a brilliant title. And I think Simon Reynolds, who I spoke to for the book, he was like, when you get a title like that, you want to know what this band is about, because that's a brilliant title.
Yes.
It just makes you think, oh, why have you put these two things together? Like I think if I saw John Cage Bubblegum, come today in a playlist or whatever, I'd be like, I want to know what that song is like. Why on earth are you calling it John Cage Bubblegum?
Because in the book you mentioned the Archers, is it the Archers Sugar Sugar and the Monkeys as well, don't you? As sort of potential, was it influences on that particular track?
Well, it was just like, that's bubblegum pop, basically. And I was sort of trying to explain what it was, and those are like classic examples, I think, of really great pop songs, but like often dismissed as, lightweight, but great songs.
And what about space age bachelor pad music? What was so kind of excitable for you on that track?
I mean, basically, it's kind of the name in a way. Like, if you were looking for the name to sum up what Stereolab are about, that is a brilliant name, because it's like, again, it kind of sums up, it's that collage, the kind of different influences. It's futuristic, it's retro futuristic, it's all kinds of different things. So that basically was why I wanted to use it, because I just thought it's a fantastic name and kind of quite sums up what the band are about.
Yes. Is it the case then that, having done this, that you've gone back and your appreciation has just gone up tenfold at this point?
Oh, totally. I mean, I've got to the point where I can't think of any band that's actually better than Stereolab, if you know what I mean. Like, I'm not saying they're the best band in history, but it's like, well, who's better? And I know you can't talk about music objectively because it doesn't make any kind of sense, but I think if you try to sort of draw some kind of objective line, it's like, okay, what's a good thing in music? Okay, well, I guess great tunes. Stereolab got amazing tunes. You want someone who innovates. Stereolab, totally innovative. Or you want a band that changes. They do that. You want a band that has great singers, great players. They've got all of that, and it just the funny. I mentioned the Daft Punk book earlier. That was based around one of their albums, Discovery, and writing a whole book around an album. I kind of like. I still love Discovery, but I can't listen to it anymore. It's because it's just too much. And like, the great thing about Stereolab is I could write about the whole career, and they've got something like 400 songs, and the quality is just amazing. And I can still go back, and there are things I don't really know, and this day I'll listen to this album, this day this B-sides collection or whatever. And so yeah, my appreciation for them has absolutely kind of rocketed.
Yes. Well, it sounds a bit like my, intrigue of David Bowie. It's like he's got a lot of work, and some of it is incredibly interesting and good, and some of it is a bit difficult, but kind of curious as well. The bad things are not totally awful. They're just a bit peculiar and a bit, not a great period, or that's not a great album, that idea didn't work. But there's still things to sort of listen to, and I quite like that process of thinking, well, I'm not just going to dismiss it because it's everyone says this is terrible. It's quite an interesting one, and even if it is painful, it's still quite you're still thinking of the artist who made it and why they made it and why it didn't quite work. But actually, it doesn't matter because there's another album that comes along. Oh, that's also terrible. But never mind. Oh, this is much better. We had got there. I quite liked seeing an artist as in rather than just going, that's it, I'm just going to get a day job, but I'll persevere a bit longer. And I guess, in a lot of ways, because you gave me, I think in the book you mentioned that the members kept making music after they split up or the band stopped. Was that true?
Yeah. Like Tim did a band called Cavern of Antimatter, who are basically sound a lot like Stereolab without the singing, and Letitia had a solo career, which is, I mean, they still do their kind of things today, and the other band members had other things which were less well known, but yeah, they kept on doing music, and I think they still keep on doing that kind of concurrently with Stereolab, and they're not as big, but like they're still brilliant music. I mean, particularly like Cavern of Antimatter and Letitia's solo record, absolutely amazing.
How do you imagine them sort of the phone call came through or the email to say, what do you think about getting back together? Were you kind of, have you thought about that? How they must have approached it after a few years of silence?
I have. Well, actually, that's interesting because I haven't. That's not really something I go into in the book. And now I think about it, I guess I could have done. I mean, I would imagine the slightly mundane truth is it was probably their manager who was like, we're doing these reissues because they probably had to be in touch, about reissues and what they wanted to do. They're not like big enough and successful enough that it'd be like your lawyer speaks to my lawyer.
Yes.
And also, something which I didn't know actually till I wrote this book is there is a Laetitia Sadier solo song, whose for the moment the name escapes me, which Tim co-wrote. So when like I think it was like 5 years after the band had split up, she asked him to write something for the album, and then she sung on it. And so I guess like relations were kind of, you know, cordial, working kind of
Yes.
and it kind of really surprised me when I found out. I wish I could remember what it was called. But yeah, I guess that, well, I mean, they got a kid together as well. So, there's a lot, they couldn't just flounce off and never speak to each other. They've got a kid
Yes,
to.
there was things to organise. Do you think now that they've got this album out and there's got tours and stuff, do you think they're going to now be a regular feature on the musical landscape?
I I think so. Um, because I think they've probably got things organized to a level where they can do what they like. So if they want to do a massive tour, they can do it. If they want to do 3 festivals, they can do it. If they want to record a new album, they can do it. And I they're probably not earning loads of money from it, but I bet they're probably earning enough that don't have to like all share a hotel room, that kind of thing. So I think it's probably quite sort of.
I think with some bands, they can occasionally, after a period of like, I never want to think about what we did, there's an appreciation of thinking, actually, this was quite good, and sort of processing their own sort of demons or whatever it is, and sort of, yes, becoming a bit happier about their past after probably lots of regrets and a bit of bitterness sometimes. I find that, speaking to people, there's nothing like like the passing of time to sort of make people feel a little bit differently about what happened in those kind of formative years. And I would imagine they probably thought, God, some of these records are great. I haven't really thought about them, and now we can get to play them live and enjoy them again. It must, there must be something about it. And also looking at the obituary page, going, Jesus Christ, people keep dying. We mustn't just put it off for too long. You never know. It does sort of sharpen the mind, doesn't it? It's a bit of a sobering thought.
I mean, I would hope that if they ever do read the book, which I suspect they probably won't, but like if they ever do, I hope they would just see that it's with a lot of love, and hopefully they'll be like, oh yeah, this is kind of quite impressive what we did.
Yes.
People love what we did, and yeah, there were some difficult years, and yeah, this thing there was tragedy in it, and but hopefully they will see that basically there's so much love for them ongoing.
Well, it's good. It's good. Have you got any other projects that you've got sort of on the back burner at the moment?
I mean, I have a Substack like most people, and I have a podcast which they're both called Line Noise, and I do sort of freelance journalism. I've got uh, I've got one book idea that I was working towards that I might revive, but not sure if I will. And I've got one idea that I've been thinking about, and we will see. Basically,
Yes, and your book is out in March, isn't it?
March 20th, I believe. Yeah.
My God, you've got a whole month. Well, I have to say it's amazing, and yes, it's been fascinating. And also, you know, I was not a huge, I mean, that sort of fan that knew all the work. So it's been really fascinating listening to the tracks and reading the bits about these tracks as well. It kind of helps to focus it a bit, really, over a long period of time. So, yes, it's been fantastic, actually. No, I do love Jawbone, and they just keep on bringing them out, don't they? Actually, there are a lot of quite good publishers now who are sort of specialising in obscure indie pop. I guess
Well,
did you read Mickey's book as well?
oh, that's an amazing book. Yes, yeah. And uh, that is, I honestly think that's one of the best music books I've ever read, because I was kind of expecting, oh, this is lush, happy-go-lucky, indie people, and you read the first bit about her childhood and what she endured
Yes.
from her grandmother, and you're just like, good God! And in fact, the bit before she's even picked up a guitar is absolutely astounding. And I think it's so good. And then she gets into Lush, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant as well. And I it's a great. Have you read the book about Lawrence Street Level
Oh
Superman?
yes, the Will Hodgkinson one.
That is another amazing book. That is so good. That's one of the best. Again, I think one of the best books I've ever read about music.
Yes, I mean there are, I don't know, there are just a lot coming out. He says, looking here and not seeing any that jump out. But yes, I know we're sort of it's kind of a blessed time really at the moment, isn't it? And I'm sort of grateful for it because in a way my decade, the 80s, it was always like told by few certain people like Dylan Jones, and it was always like the Blitz Club and New Romantic and Spandau Ballet and Live Aid. And I remember thinking, that's nothing. I did go to Live Aid. I thought it was rubbish. But the lineup was awful. But anyway, but that wasn't my 80s. It was all sort of, Red Wedge and the Smiths and the Redskins and all, the June Brides and Mighty Lemon Drops. It was all those kind of indie bands, and going to small little gigs at the Arts Centre and, just going, yeah, this is good. Because I remember seeing Lush and the Pale Saints on the same bill. And I saw Tad with Nirvana on the same bill.
Oh, that's the Norwich gig, isn't it? That's the one that kind of people, or I think that's probably the most legendary gig in Norwich history. I would
Yes.
say.
So, but then, I mean, for that period, Barry was just, I mean, not just Barry, but, people just were on it. But then you look at West Runton during the sort of 80s or 70s, and you're thinking, Jesus, you booked, the Dead Kennedys and the Commodores. Someone was very eclectic on that one, and lots of reggae, So I don't know, as we said, there is a lot of good music about it. It's just, yes, just keeping yourself curious and interested, like John Peel, as his producer once said. When John Peel reaches puberty, we're in trouble. And I think it's kind of having the sort of the hearing of kind of a teenager, isn't it? Of how teenage hits, which is what music is generally about. So, yes, it can't all be David Bowie's, Black Star. Or did you hear the latest Cure album, by the way?
Yeah, I reviewed it actually.
God, that's an amazing piece of work. I just thought, did you like it?
So I really liked it, but the funny thing is, everyone was going, "Oh, it's their best since Disintegration," and for a start, I really love Pop Cure, so I really, really love Friday I'm in Love and things like that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
which I thought was an astounding album. And I'd kind of dismissed, the what was it, the 4 albums after that. But in the name of reviewing it, I went back to them and I was like, and I found actually they're pretty good. So I kind of thought the the newest one was very good, but it wasn't like head and shoulders above the previous ones. So it was like another very good Cure album, if that makes sense.
Yes. Well, yes. I mean, to be honest, like you, I'd sort of missed quite a few from the 80s. Like, yeah, I'm not that. A bit like I said about the last Smiths album. I just thought I'd slightly lost interest, really.
Yeah.
It's terrible to admit, but it's true. Yeah, so I'll need to go back and listen to some of those Cure albums. I suppose I just thought he captured that kind of sense of where he was in the world really beautifully, which I think a lot of artists really struggle with. Like, oh my God, how am I going to write about this? What's happening to me? And you think, well, you've got a lot of hospital appointments you could write about. It's like, does that make good pop music? Not really. But, he seems to do, I just thought he did it really well. The song about his brother dying and other
Yeah.
bits and pieces. It was, and they had Reeves Gabrel on guitar as well, which was good. So I don't know. It was a nice melancholic album in places. But you
Yeah.
recommend the 4 before then as well.
Yeah, again, if you look, I read a lot about this, and I talked to my friend who's a massive Cure fan. Sorry, and I was like, which one would you really recommend? And basically, I think there's 4 of them in between Wish and then the very new one, and like speak to 5 different people, they'll tell you 5. No, can't tell you 5, but like speak to 4 different people, they'll tell you
Yeah.
4 albums that are each the best. Like no one agrees on what the best. I think my favorite is Blood Flowers, but like there are people who've been like, no, that's terrible album. What you really want to listen to is what was it, 435 Dream or something like that. No one agrees. So, but yeah, there's a lot to catch up.
Yes, well, I don't know. That's the joy of music. At least it's, we're focusing on something quite beautiful rather than the state of the world. So it's swings and roundabouts. Anyway, look, thank you for your time. This has been
Thank you.
amazing. And yes, I've really loved sort of delving into your passion for a band, actually. It's amazing. But yes, well, look, all the best. And yes, I hope, are you going to do some book launch review night in London at the Rough Trade Centre or shop? Are you going to be on tour?
No, probably not. It's a bit difficult with working in Barcelona, basically getting time off, and to be honest, because I don't, you can probably imagine, profit margins on a book about Stereolab are not vast. So I'd like to, but I don't think there's any of that planned.
Well, I hope it goes well. I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. I mean, it will travel, won't it? Japan must love Stereolab.
Yeah. I hope people around the world,
will embrace it. Were they big in America at all?
Yeah, kind of cult success. The funny thing about them is they're about as big everywhere, if you know what I mean. That kind of band that can go to almost any city in the world and play to 600 people, but like probably couldn't play to 10,000 in any city, if that makes sense.
Right, yeah, that's fair enough. Well, at least they've kept themselves grounded. Anyway, look, thank you for your time. And yes, that's been amazing. And I'll say goodbye. Take care.
Okay, give my regards to Norwich as well.
I will. A fine city. See you later. Bye. And that was me in conversation with Ben Cardew, talking about his love affair with Stereolab. As I said, the book is coming out at the end of March. It's titled Space Age Bachelor Pad Music, the story of Stereolab in 20 songs. This has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh.